Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wolt Tech Talks podcast. Today, we will be discussing how is it to code as a team. Today's guest, Thomas Pachet, will tell us his experiences from pair and mob programming and all the other cool stuff. Thomas, would you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Thomas. I'm a software engineer here at Wolt in the merchant acquisition team. And yeah.
Great. And what sort of experiences you have from coding as a team?
Well, I guess in our current in the current team, we have been kind of experimenting, I guess, lately with pairing and mob programming. And I guess that kind of stems from my past experiences where for almost 2 years, I worked in a team which was doing 100% pair programming, essentially. And yeah, it was very hard to kind of see all the benefits and then kind of like not try and like translate that into a new team. So yeah.
So what were the main selling points that you gave to your current team to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I suppose when you are pairing like 100% and mobbing 100%, there's kind of no need then for like this kind of like branching, like versioning and stuff like that. There's no need then for like asynchronous code reviews. There's basically like everyone is more or less across everything that's happening. And you've got a lot less like context switching. People aren't blocked waiting for like, how it is, like random computer issues or whatever, like, yeah, and it's just kind of like teamwork, I guess, at its purest.
Sounds good, and we'll dive a bit deeper to those benefits later on, and of course talk about the challenges as well. But yeah, before diving deeper, could you maybe just quickly explain what does it mean to do pair programming and mob programming? Maybe in different places they mean different things, but like a overall view.
Yeah, well, I guess like the kind of cliched view is like two engineers on one keyboard or whatever, but I guess like it's yeah, I mean, like the way that I did it kind of pre-pandemic was, you have two engineers sitting kind of next to each other, and one has they both have their laptops or whatever, and might be one person is driving, one person is like navigating, or and there's like a variety of different techniques. I guess there's one that I've seen which is like this ping pong, I think it's called, which is where like one person like writes a test. They're kind of like adhering to like the TDD kind of red-green refactor cycle. So they write like the green portion of the test, and then they like push the code, and then they like swap, and then the other person like refactors and so on. And so it doesn't even have to be like programming either. Like it can just be like two sets of eyes on the same problem. Even it could be like designing or modeling or anything basically. Yeah, so I guess it's a rather loose definition, but yeah, I guess just two or more people working on the same problem.
And how is it different when there are at least 3 people involved?
I guess you don't have this like driver navigator dynamic as much. You kind of have like, like a third wheel almost. So you kind of have to like change how things work for that. But I guess with mobbing, I guess it's more like, we have like this complex problem. You kind of have maybe like one person kind of driving for a little bit, and then they might like push some code up, and then like the next person is like, all right, well, I've got some good ideas on how to do this, so they might take over, and so on and so forth. And all the while you've got, I guess, like the other people kind of blending their insights and being like, oh, have you considered this case and that case, etc. And then like the other way it works really well, I guess in that sense, is like when you have maybe like separate code repositories for like a client and a server. So maybe those two need to agree on a contract. So yeah, in the same like mob, you might have some people working on the back end portion and some people on the like client side portion, and then they can kind of agree on this like contract. And the kind of benefit of that, of course, is that you don't get like redundancy in like API endpoints. People adding like extra fields or whatever in case they might be useful, or like we don't actually need this field, so you then kind of need to like you do some changes, and then you might need to like come back and rework stuff. And basically that's the kind of main selling point, I suppose, of mobbing in this way, is that you kind of do something once, kind of end to end, and then maybe you can come back and revisit that. But there's kind of no need for this like back and forth like rework, I guess. And also the other important thing is like waiting for one change to go before the other. Everything can kind of be done, in any order, I suppose, if you've like architected things right.
Great. That could be a good starting point to start discussing about like how is it in practice. So you mentioned that pre-pandemic, mainly in the same location, maybe on the same computer even, but of course now the world has changed and we are very remote friendly at Wolt, and we also have people from different locations, even if they are not remotely. So it's very rare treat to have your teammates at the same location. So how does it work in these remote settings?
Yeah, I mean, like it was the thing that made pairing work, I suppose, in my previous job, was that everyone was in the same like bay, and you could just kind of like scoot your chair over to them essentially if they were at their desk, and you could just say, hey, we're working on this now, okay, fine. Whereas in this like Zoom and Slack world, I guess there's a lot more like coordination, I suppose, required. And like one thing I've seen work, but I think many people are ambivalent, is I suppose when you're in the office, you can kind of see who is at their desk, and you can kind of go over to them. So the kind of, I don't know, remote digital Zoom equivalent, I suppose, is where you have this like kind of like lobby, I suppose, for the team. So like people are like always kind of on Zoom in a sense, so you can kind of see who is at their desk. And then, if someone is at their desk, then you can kind of like ping them and be like, hey, do you want to work on stuff together? And obviously that has its pros and cons. I mean, cons, you have a Zoom call open all day. And like, but I guess coming back to coordination, there is this idea, I guess, that you should like schedule these sorts of things, I guess. And that's a problem we have not only with pairing, but also with like, I don't know, socializing with coworkers as well. Like, how do you have that like spontaneous like coffee moment or whatever? So you have to schedule it instead, but I don't know, it seems like it sort of misses the point. So that was a really roundabout way of saying it's really challenging, I guess. And there's a lot of like tools out there. There's like various apps and things you can use for pair programming, but I think the tools aren't the solution. I'd say the solution is just is how to like kind of bring the like initiative like out of the team. And I think if the team sees enough benefits, I guess, to pairing, then they will find a way, I guess, in a sense. Yeah.
How has it been in your team? Like, how are these sessions initiated? Like you mentioned the ad hoc coffee moments. Like how do you start one of those with a editor open?
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I suppose one thing we do is like when we have our like stand-ups and dailies and things, we kind of see how everyone's doing, and then you can kind of say, well, hey, like if you need a hand with something, let's hop into a call straight after this. And like, funnily enough, like something that's really interesting is when you hop into a call, because we have like a kind of a Zoom link, I guess, in our like in like our team channel, where you can just kind of hop in there anytime and start working away at stuff. And funnily enough, what happens when like you jump into that room, like other people just tend to join as well once they see that like other people in there. It's almost like FOMO, right? It's just like everyone has to kind of be in there. And you get some, yeah, that kind of then leads to like interesting insights, I guess, as well. And you kind of get, always a bit more information than can be said in like a 5-minute snippet, I guess, in a morning meeting. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that like one practical use case to get together is when you're defining some sort of contract between client and the backend. Does that mean that you are basically teaming up backend engineers and front-end engineers, and maybe if you have mobile engineers, like all the clients and the backend at the same time? And is it like something also outside of the open API spec or whatever is used for defining the contract, like actually doing the, let's say, for example, the backend endpoint and the client-side developers are there to discuss the edge cases, what things result in bad requests, etc., or is it just the contract that's being?
No, I mean, like it is just like it is looking at the kind of whole thing like end to end, I suppose. Like I guess when you're developing on the client side, you need to not only think like, I mean, yeah, it's tempting to just be like, oh, okay, I have this function that just like fires an API request and it gets back something that looks like this. But it's often really good to see like, oh, well, every time you make this API request, you make n number of like database calls and stuff, and then to get this one field, but couldn't you just compute this field doing this and this and this and so on and so forth. So I think you get a lot of like important insights when you bring like the when the people who know like the clients best, and what kind of and how and what kind of information is used, and then kind of see like all the way down, oh, okay, well, you don't actually need this field. We just use it to, display an emoji or whatever. So if it uses all this like CPU cycles to just do that, then we can do something different, sort of thing. So, and then, on the other side, it's like the backend engineers are very much like, okay, I'm in my little like kind of backend world. I'm serving out something to someone, and they use it, and maybe I look at some metrics on some dashboard or something, but then if you have the kind of like the client side peeps talking to you as well, you kind of get more of an insight into how something is used, and then you might even realize that something isn't used at all, or something could be more efficient. So there's like agreeing on the contract, but then there's also this like holistic kind of understanding of how the system works, which isn't to say that like backend people need to know fully how to do front-end development, but it's more like if they kind of work together, then it's they get this kind of like better understanding, I suppose, and it kind of leads into this like T-shaped engineer sort of thing. Like the backend peeps are like really deep experts in this kind of like like backend design principles and persistence and all this kind of stuff, but they know at least somehow how the clients are used, and vice versa, I guess. So we talk about knowledge sharing with mobbing and stuff. It's not only like how does the product work, but it's also like, how do our systems actually interact with one another?
Yeah, sounds like these mob sessions could be like or very low-hanging fruit to tackle pretty hard architectural design decisions early on. Yeah, sounds very interesting. How about like on a practical level? Uh, how is the like practices related to code reviews? Is it similar to asynchronous working model where somebody does their stuff in a branch, opens up a PR, somebody reviews, some changes needed, I'll make the changes, please do a bit more changes, I'll do a bit more changes, and 3 days later we will merge it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've just kind of said it there with like 3 days later. Like it's like extraordinarily inefficient, basically. Like this asynchronous pull request kind of model, and something that you get from pairing is it just eliminates that effectively. Like that's not to say like code review isn't important. Like code review is like probably the most important thing, but it kind of loses its pizzazz when you just like are looking at a diff and you're going, yeah, cool, looks fine. Like, why did you call a variable this, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if you're kind of there in the weeds with the other person while they're doing stuff, you can say, you can kind of be there and say, why is the variable called this? Oh, it's because of n reasons. Oh, should we put a comment there or something instead? Okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then, could we structure something like this? Fine, whatever. You're missing a test for this. And then it's kind of like you're reviewing it as you go, but you're also, I guess, building quality in, which I guess is a really important point, which is kind of one of Deeming's principles. So Deeming is like a guy who pulled Japan out of the post-World War II, crisis into the like industrial era. And he consulted with Toyota, and kind of one of the main points he made was like, you can't like inspect and find issues. You have to like build quality in from the start. And I guess inspecting and finding issues is precisely what the kind of asynchronous pull request kind of model does. Whereas, when you're there in the weeds and you're doing it, then you can kind of find and improve things as you go. And then once you remove pull requests, you essentially remove branches, and then it kind of lends itself nicely then to the rest of this kind of like extreme programming, kind of trunk-based development, where which then also blends in nicely with like continuous integration, which is where you have every single commit is constantly being built and deployed, and continuous delivery, of course. And so then, yeah, you basically reap all the benefits of that. So I suppose, pairing essentially like unlocks this whole like other class of, I guess, like ways of working improvements.
Awesome. I think we could continue to, we started with what were the selling points for your team. So looking back, how has it been? Like, have people adopted it since telling the initial selling points, and have these selling points realized in real world? And like how people have generally found pairing and mopping?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been received well. The challenges are kind of, I guess it's about like making it stick. I guess it's like reducing the like barrier to entry. Like it's so easy, I guess, to just be like, create a branch, push, pull request, review. Here's a link. I'm going to get some coffee, sort of thing. So it's kind of difficult to kind of say, all right, before I work on something, I'm going to go, DM or send like a message to someone and be like, hey, let's work on this together. Because coming to this like remote working thing, you kind of have to like sync people's schedules up. And I guess in our team, that is also really difficult when you have like half the team is in Berlin as well. So there's like an hour time difference. And as we might know, Finns tend to eat lunch really early. So there's like this like kind of block in the middle of the day, which is where everyone is having lunch. So you kind of have to do stuff really early in the morning or like kind of later in the afternoon. And that's kind of one challenge. And then, yeah, the other challenges are around like reducing the barrier to entry. So one thing that's helped, I guess, is having this like Zoom room in our channel. So you can just kind of like pop in there and do stuff. And yeah, I guess it's trying to make the tools kind of work for you. But in general, like, I think it's been like the benefits have been realized by the team. The issue, yeah, is just trying to like break out of this existing way of working. I mean, one way that worked, like in my previous job, was that we just like you won't like Git forbade you from pushing to other branches essentially. So you always had to push to master, and what that meant was that you just didn't feel comfortable doing stuff without someone like kind of helping you and watching you. So yeah, it was kind of structuring the tools in such a way. And, you know, I partially blame GitHub for this kind of like how we've got to this point, I suppose, of like lots of asynchronous code reviews, because it was a tool kind of built for open source contributions where there's people all over the world who never met, and they just have some code and someone needs to give it, a pair of eyes. But really, like, we're all in the same team, and we should kind of, trust one another and kind of work closer together in that sense.
Were you the only one who had previous experiences from coding as a team, or did your teammates have some previous experiences as well?
Well, as far as I know, I think everyone else is kind of new to pairing. I think our team lead has worked in this kind of pairing environment and like extreme programming environment before. So he's often like in the background, like shouting, do it to like the rest of the team. So yeah, but it's kind of interesting.
Just push the master.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So at the beginning, we briefly discussed the main selling points. I think it might be interesting to take a deeper dive into what are the pros, and then after that, maybe discuss a bit about the challenges. You have already mentioned some of them, but you can also go like hand in hand. This is the good thing. This is probably not a good thing, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we talked a bit about like code reviews and stuff, and I think that's the kind of main selling point, is you like reduce this kind of context switching. Like, you work on stuff and then someone sends you a link to a PR, and then you have to look at a different thing and kind of get accustomed to this, and then you're like, man, this is hurting my brain, so I'm going to come back to what I'm doing. And then there's kind of this like this kind of cognitive load essentially. And so, yeah, by removing that, I guess you also tend to remove like wait times. Like, I guess we use this tool called Swamia, I think, all across Wolt, and it tells you things like how long, what's the average wait time for like a PR. And I think, it's some places, I think it's like, in some code bases, it's like days. And, you think about like how much you could achieve in a day if you didn't have to like wait for someone to review it. And I guess that's one of the selling points. Is it seems counterintuitive that multiple people working on the same thing ends up getting you faster. But then when you think about like, I guess the concept of a queue, and that like you do all this work really quickly and then like it stops at the queue and then you wait days for the review, then if you eliminate that, you essentially, like, how fast you do things is basically then up to you rather than up to the gods of code review. So that's, I guess, the kind of main thing. And then the other thing, of course, we talked about was like building this quality in rather than like inspecting. I mean, there's the old saying of like, you give a engineer 10 lines to review, you'll find 10 problems, but then 100 lines, they'll say looks good to me, sort of thing. So it's hard to miss that stuff when you're there working with someone. And I guess the other one as well is like, we all have this like random issues, I guess. Well, now that the M1, the Mac M1s are out, people have all sorts of random issues. So it's like, people can spend days trying to fix these issues. So if you have like someone there with you with similar problems, they can just be like, oh yeah, run this random, add this thing to your Z shell thing, and then it fixes it. And then, that's your days of waiting essentially eliminated as well. But yes, having said that, the downsides, I mean, I'm sure everyone can relate to this. It's just that it's like exhausting, I guess, to like be constantly like working closely with other people like this. And I've heard that like, 6 hours or whatever, 5 hours of like pairing coding on your own is equivalent to like an hour of pairing. Essentially, it's just like this like really condensed, like intense kind of interaction. And I suppose for a lot of us who are introverted and that it kind of just drains your like mental energy. So after like some pairing, you need to like sit in a dark corner and cry for 30 minutes and then before you can do anything else. And the other thing as well is it's really like, it really makes you feel kind of exposed and vulnerable because everyone can kind of like see your desktop. And like how fast you type or whatever, and like what weird habits you might have and stuff. And I guess this kind of ties in with like a culture, I guess, of where you work. So a place with, let's say, like low psychological safety, where people don't feel like able to like express themselves or able to speak up. I think something like pairing would be incredibly difficult because often places with these low safety, they measure like lines of code and did you work 8 hours today and all this kind of thing, as opposed to like, did you provide some kind of value to the customer. Whereas if you have this like higher safety, then it's like vulnerable. You feel vulnerable having your like desktop there, but like you don't care because like it's the rest of the team. You feel like pretty safe in that environment. But the best part about like seeing other people's desktops is you can like recommend them like performance hacks and stuff as well. Like I found this like Git diffing tool in the terminal only from working with like one of the other teammates. So you can kind of learn a lot. But yeah, like it's exhausting, but also I think some people just prefer to work like asynchronously. And like the kind of people might prefer to work alone. And I suppose there's like kind of two sides to that coin. I guess on the one hand, like everyone is part of a team, I suppose, in some way, shape, or form. So you kind of have to just like grin and bear almost, of just like, well, you have to work with one another. But then I suppose there's something, I guess, which has kind of been working in our team, which is this like kind of hybrid approach. So where you kind of do still have the like branches and asynchronous stuff, but there's like it's kind of like a high trust sort of system. So with a lot of like review kind of done after the fact. So the way we've done this is with a technique called ship, show, ask. So rather than like, pairing and commits to master, it's like, you can create a branch, but if, tests pass or whatever and everything looks good, then, feel free to just merge it. And then you can ping someone and then just be like, hey, does this look fine? And then you can kind of come back and iterate on it. And then in a sense, you haven't done something kind of lone wolf. And you've also, had a pair of eyes from someone else look at what you're doing. And then, of course, there's the traditional, like, here's a branch I've created, have a review. And then when you think it's good, then we can merge it up. Just going to take a water break. Oh.
Just wanted to quickly comment on the vulnerability aspect. So, yeah, it can be very scary to show the way you're working, like this is how I use my editor. Here's my desktop. We're very vulnerable at the beginning, but I would assume that the trust increases and people get more comfortable with that over time.
Yeah, and I mean, like one thing that's super interesting, like people who might not be super big on pairing and mobbing, like when there's a crisis, like some kind of disaster, they're often the first to be like, hey, I need everyone into the Zoom call to like help me do something. And then so it's almost like these kind of heavy situations kind of pull people in. And maybe that's kind of how we need to view like product development a bit more as well. It's like this really important thing that we should be getting right all the time, I suppose.
Awesome. I took some notes about the biggest benefits. So the recap reduces context switching, right? Wait times are gone, or not completely gone, but significantly shorter at least. And then quality in, that was great point. And also the solving random issues at the spot. I think that's overlooked benefit. And as a software engineer, I tend to run into random issues all the time. So maybe the coworker could help me out with those. And yeah, of course, there are challenges. Thanks for sharing those as well. Maybe could we end this with discussing about the tooling? So any recommendations for if people want to start pairing up, what kind of tools, editors, whatever to use for that purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on your like internet connection, but I assume like for the most part, Zoom and screen sharing tends to be fine because you get like the kind of traditional experience. You see everything. You see, terminal windows and all this sorts of stuff, and Chrome and browsers and all these things. Whereas like there's all these other tools. I guess there's like Code with Me, which is the like the IntelliJ one, where you pretty much just hop into the other person's IDE, but then you obviously don't see things like terminal and stuff like that unless you use the terminal in the IDE. But I guess it depends like what works for you. Like if you're purely doing like a code heavy refactoring task or something, then yeah, maybe just jumping into an IDE with someone works. I haven't found any problems with Zoom since moving to Europe. Australian internet. So Zoom and Slack calls were often like super janky. But yeah, I mean, like these are fine, honestly, for the most use cases. There's a bunch of like tools as well out there. I think there's like something called Tuple or Tuple, whatever you want to call it. I think which is specifically like a pair programming tool, but it costs money and it's a bit like left field, I guess. So yeah, I mean we all have Zoom, so that's the one I would just use. Yeah.
All right. So sounds like some sort of screen sharing facility would do at least at the beginning.
Yeah, and you can always just find that, hey, we don't need to share screen, we can do this instead, and then you can kind of iterate on it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Thomas. This has been very insightful and inspiring. Would you have any closing tips for people or teams who are after this, they're inspired, but they don't really know how to start? Like what's the first step to take?
Yeah, I mean the first step, I guess, is just to like talk to one another, I guess, because it's kind of like by kind of initially breaking down that barrier, you can kind of, or even just hopping onto a call with someone and be like, hey, let's chat about something. And then, it sort of naturally develops into like, I'll just share my screen, I'll just share my editor, look, we're pair programming and that sort of thing. But, being that person to kind of take that initial leap is really hard. So I think that's the important first step. Once you've done that, the rest is like super easy. but it's just that initial first like hurdle, and kind of breaking out of the like this like kind of solo mindset, I guess. So yeah, that's talk to each other. That's what I would say.
That's a good advice for so many problems, not only the pairing up and mopping. Great, thank you, Thomas. And thanks for the listeners. See you or listen to us next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.